Hey, friends, welcome back to Sessions with System and Soul. We are diving in today with what we call a soul dive. So, soul dive is it's not tools, it's not concepts. We're really looking at you today. Um, Here's the thing, we know that running a business can be really hard. Of course, we have mountaintop moments, but we also have a lot of time that we spend in those valleys. And there is just a burden sometimes of leadership that can feel really, really heavy. And maybe at times you wonder, I know speaking for myself when I say there are times when I ask myself, like, can I handle this? Can I do this? How am I going to deal with this problem? Shouldn't I know this by now? Shouldn't I be a better leader at this point? And we're not gonna be able to answer all those questions, but we're gonna dig deep on maybe what drives that and maybe find a better way to solve the problems that kind of exist in our minds as leaders with something other than working harder and doing more. And so today is really about looking at ourselves, looking at who we are as an individual, who we are as a leader, and maybe fortifying the inside as much as the outside. So, we're going to do what we call a soul dive. A soul dive is just an exercise that creates space for this work on ourselves, for this personal reflection. If you're listening along, this is going to be just a moment for you to really think about your leadership. We do this internally, and it's incredibly impactful for our team and our system and soul coaches. Everybody always gets one really, really cool insight out of this. So I encourage you to stick around. Benj is the master of leading the soul dive. So he's going to walk us through and then we're going to discuss it. So I will see you on the other side. I will be following along and sharing insights as we go.
If I'm a master, it's only because, I need the work, and so, like, doing the internal work is something that, I've always gravitated toward, because I know I need it. I need it for myself, and I need it to show up in the world the way that I want to show up in the world, and so, the soul dive became as just a way of me sharing, mostly with our coaches internally, what I was thinking about processing, but as we were talking about doing this first soul dive with this show sessions, we landed on the most foundational exercise that we do with leadership teams in the realm of leadership. And when we talk about leadership, we have a little bit different approach than most people in the marketplace. Most people in the marketplace really talk about how do you lead other people, and we really focus on how do you lead yourself really well so that you can help other people lead themselves really well. No matter what level of leadership you're at in your organization, whether you're an individual contributor, so that you can help other people lead themselves really well. No matter what level of leadership you're at in your organization, whether you're an individual contributor, whether you lead people, whether you lead teams, whether you lead functions, whether you lead a whole organization, at every level, you still have to lead yourself first and foremost. So, we're going to talk about this idea of what is an exceptional leader and where does that come from and how do we build those muscles? If you're driving, listening to this, do your best. If you're sitting at a table, grab something to write with and you can play along. McKenzie, I've made do this. We teach it in training. So we've done this together probably a dozen times. So Mackenzie's always trying to think of someone new when I ask this question. But when you think of the greatest coach, boss, mentor, leader you've ever gotten to work for directly with, not like watch their Instagram clips, but somebody that you have a real relationship with and they've led you in a meaningful way, who comes to mind? And when you think of that person, what are some of the attributes that make them exceptional? Why were they great? Why did they impact your life? And so if we were doing this in a room, we would take time and write it down and we would go around and share. And as we would go around and share, we'd hear just cool stories of cool people and how they impacted their lives. Mackenzie, do you remember does somebody come to mind that you've used in the past?
Yeah, absolutely. Um,
Who was it, and what were some of the things that brought them to mind?
yeah, so I before we started System and Soul, I was working at, a company called Maxwell Leadership and got the privilege of working with a lot of great leaders, but one in particular, his name was Jason Brooks. He passed away about 3 years ago, to cancer, but he in the time that I knew him, he was so patient with me. I was a very young leader who had a lot of ambitions. I don't know why I'm talking about that in past tense, like, that's I am still someone with a lot of ambition, but, he he really helped me for someone who was young and had a low level of experience in a role, with a high level of ambition. He really helped guide me and just was so kind to me, in the process of learning and growing in that business. He was an exceptional listener. I think all the time about how much of his time that I took. Uh, he was probably trying to get a lot done, and I'm in there, bringing him what my questions and my challenges. He and the one thing that I think about all the time is he was a brilliant person who could get a lot of really good work done. He always had there was always a high demand for him and his time because he was such a great contributor, but he was always so, like the word I wanna use is, like, principled in what mattered to him. Like, his family was his priority. He would get into his office early in the morning, and he would call his wife, and they would pray together before he started his day, and I just thought, like, wow, like, he really knows what he wants out of his life and who he wants to be, and he just is prioritizing what matters most. So, um, that's meant a lot to me over the years, and I think about him often, and yeah, so I would say he was one of the best leaders we've ever
What
worked.
was his name?
Jason Brooks.
Jason. Alright, so it's so cool to hear, about people like Jason, like these leaders that exist in the world, and too many of us haven't gotten to work with a Jason or somebody like that, that's awesome. Most of the time, people have to go back to, like, a youth coach for a youth sports league or a high school coach or maybe played in college. It's amazing how much coaches have impact on people in those developmental years that become their model, the best model that they have for leadership, even after a decade in the workforce. So as we proceed in this exercise, it's this data that we use comes from the research that some of our friends, Tim Spiker and Vanessa Kiley, did, uh, where they went and searched for. They had access to a big association of leaders, and they tried to figure out, is there something that would predict who would be an exceptional leader? So they had all this data, some personality assessments, and they looked for correlating data. They found nothing. They did not give up. So they went and administrated 360s to all of these leaders, and they found 10 attributes of an exceptional leader. So let me read through these, and then I'll tell you the big aha. So here are the 10. We're gonna put them on the screen if you're watching video. If not, listen closely. Here we go. Pursue vision, drive culture, think strategically, they're others focused, they ensure execution, they unleash motivation, they cultivate talent, they're inwardly sound, they communicate effectively, and they marshal resources. 10 attributes of what makes an exceptional leader. These are the things that exceptional leaders do. And they were happy that they got some data, but nothing in that list makes anybody go, oh, yeah, I've never thought about that before. But there was one insight buried in there to where there's 10 of these attributes. So you might think, well, each of them might make up close to 10% of a leader's effectiveness. We need to hone all 10 of these. But what they found were there were two in that list of 10 that made up more than 77% of what equated for an exceptional leader. And so it's fun in the room. We always make people guess what they are, and almost nobody gets it right. Some people get 50%. But the two attributes of it that make up an exceptional leader, 77%, is that they're others focused and inwardly sound. So if you listen carefully, you hear the other 8 are all the things that leaders do when they show up, but inwardly sound and others focused are who they are when they show up. And this is really, a tiny insight with huge implications. Because what this means is that almost every leadership development course, clip, podcast that we listen to is somehow coaching us on one of these attributes, one of the 8 that's very important, but we're honing some portion of the 23%, not the 77%.
And
So
do you mind if I
no, not at all.
you know what I think is also hard about that is I think those 8 get rewarded and recognized more readily sometimes. And so it's easy yeah, like, it's easy to believe that that is what makes you a great leader because it might be the thing that, that your CEO recognizes or that is the thing that kinda helps you get promoted or, or seemingly, and those things have real they do have value, that's why they're in the list, um but I think those 2 attributes are shocking in a way because it's almost like it goes unnoticed until it becomes, like, really noticed, you know?
Yeah, well, the other ones, like you're saying, are more a little more tangible. Like,
Mhm.
you feel like something you could go, "Yeah, they do this or they don't do this." And so it's really important, like, one of the things that we do is dive in to say, like, "Okay, so how do we make this idea of being inwardly sound and others focused tangible?" So we have some definitions, and I'll read through the definitions, but what I want you to do as you're listening to this, either physically on paper or mentally in your mind, give yourself a letter grade, like, just like you were back in school, A, B, C, D, F. Um, when I read each of these 5 bullets for inwardly sound and 5 bullets for others focused, give yourself a letter grade, be dead honest, you don't have to share this with anybody, so it's important to be honest with yourself, and then we'll come back and figure out what to do with that. Alright, inwardly sound. The first bullet is self-aware, which is an ever deepening discovery of what it is to be uniquely you, coupled with an ever expanding comprehension of how you affect others. An ever deepening discovery of what it is to be uniquely you, coupled with an ever expanding comprehension of how you affect others. The more I understand who I am, the more I understand how I affect others. The more I understand how I affect others, the more I understand who I am. There's this like, it's a network effect that happens. The tides rising, all boats in there, and so that journey is happening together on that one. The second one's principled, steadfast and discerning, and doing what is right. This is something you said about Jason a minute ago. Like
Mhm.
he was just principled and very much tied to the next one. Purposeful, living in alignment with who you truly are and what you really want. Jason knew what he wanted. He lived in alignment with it. He had principles tied to it. Like this is almost like this is talking about your example, Jason, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Next one's holistically healthy, sufficiently nourished, free of compulsions, and able to respond to all that life asks of you. Man, that free of compulsion is so convicting every time I read it. Like, and I don't think I've ever seen somebody give themselves an A plus on that one, right?
No, no.
We've all got some compulsion that is trying to rob us of being present in life. The last one under inwardly sound is secure and settled. So psychologically and physiologically at peace. There's a mental stability of we got this. There's a confidence that comes out of being secure and settled. And that energy can change the room. Like, when you walk into a room and you're inwardly sound, this is why this makes sense. Once you see it, you know it. It makes sense. Like, yes, somebody that walks in and they're inwardly sound and others focus, they can change the whole room. Uh,
You know
that's the leader I wanna be.
Well, I was gonna say, I think you do that really well, and it's like that I don't know the exact quote, but it's like there's a difference between the positional leader in a room and the person that everybody turns to when there's a problem or there's something being discussed that's important, and they're looking to that person, even if they're not the highest ranking person in the room. They're like, "What is this guy? What is this What does she think about this? Because they see that that person has a steadiness about them.
Yep. Yep. When I'm in a session room, one of the biggest things, like the red light going off in the back of my head of like when I feel like somebody's not inwardly sound, is they tend to be defensive a lot.
Mm.
Right? They're not able to hear feedback. Everything's critical, it's personal, it's like arrows all the way into their identity. So it's really hard to have like real conversations. And that's where a lot of this like false harmony, artificial alignment shows up in organizations.
Well, you also see why you can see too why some of these things, if you really think about, like, if they don't exist in a room, how ineffective a team becomes and how much, I hate to make this about productivity, but it's like how much time gets wasted, how much sideways energy gets pulled like, we get pulled into the drama of something,
Yeah.
and so you can see why there's real value in understanding this well.
Yeah. One of the things that comes to mind as you say that is the 4 gates of trust. So that might have to be one of our upcoming old eyes that we follow up with. All right, that's inwardly sound. On the other side is others focused. I know for me, I don't know if this is universally true, but for me, my ability to be in others focused is very dependent on how inwardly sound I am in that moment, in that day, like just period. So if I work on my ability to be inwardly sound, a lot of the others focused becomes a lot easier. But let's make it less squishy, right? So here's the definition. Give yourself a letter grade, 5 bullets. The first one's attentive, fully present to others in every interaction. Curious, willing to not know and eager to explore. Empathetic, able to touch into and be touched by the experiences of others without becoming enmeshed. Humble, oriented toward gratitude and honoring of the intrinsic worth of all people. Agapon, which is one of the Greek words for love, unconditionally devoted to the well-being of others. All right, McKenzie, I think you were playing along and giving yourself some letter grades there, were you?
Yeah. I We do this about every quarter when we train our coaches, so I get to do a checkup on myself. I'm getting one a little sooner than our next training, but,
How's your
um,
check? What did you notice today that might be different?
so okay, so Benj knows this, so I'll share it with you guys. I'm an Enneagram 3, if you know the Enneagram. So I'm a performer, I'm an achiever. So talking about my low scores is not something that I wanna do, but we're gonna do it. We're gonna do it. So, um, for me, I think as I think about the last, like, 90 days or so, I think I'm there's room for improvement as far as holistically healthy and secure and settled. It's just been a season of, like, there's been a lot going on. There's been unexpected challenges and conversations that come up in the midst of doing a lot of really big projects and work. There's been disappointments, and I just felt like, and I know that I assume I'm not alone in this, but, like, there's just been a lot of days where I feel like my brain does not get to turn off. I'm not sleeping well. I'm not going out and, getting my run in to kind of alleviate some of that. I'm avoiding, hanging out with people. I'm kind of just, like, trapped in this, like, I gotta go, 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 gotta get it done, and then never really having, like, a moment of peace in that. And I think that concerns me because I know how much that affects my ability to show up. Like, I think over time, if you do that too long, like, I know that it can kinda chip away at my ability to show up well in every situation, and I'm getting, I recognize that going on vacation next week, so that's gonna be good, but, like but I wanna figure out how I can avoid getting to that, getting to the precipice of that because it deteriorates how I show up in all ways, if that makes any sense.
100%. Mackenzie, thanks for sharing that. Um, I know it's one of those things that sometimes feels hard to say out loud, but then everybody around the table is going, "Yeah, I totally get that. I feel that. I've been there. I am there." And that's what happens like in the session room too. It's amazing people that have never had a conversation at this level, opening up about some of this stuff for the first time. For me, as I read it today, it was like, the purposeful, which doesn't usually come up for me, but I think I have some tensions with my calendar right now. And I'm not even sure what those are. So I probably need to stop and take like a really good calendar inventory because I find some things on my calendar that I'm really not energized by and some things that I'm not getting to. So I think that that tension is maybe growing. And so I was glad to have that just indicator today to go back and look at it.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing. Okay, we also do this when we talk through when we look at this every quarter with our coaches, we challenge ourselves with a micro action. So, like one small thing. So, what would you say? What if you had one small thing that you could do in the next week or so, what would it be? And I'll answer too. I won't put you on the spot by yourself.
Well, I'll answer for you. You just need to turn everything off next week and not check in. That's your answer. Uh, for me, I think just what I mentioned, I think I need to sit down and actually do an inventory, like an energy inventory of my calendar.
Yeah.
Uh, what is slipping that I need to have it on there for my own energy, and what's getting on there that I need to figure out another way, another person, another something that those things can happen, but not take my energy.
Yeah. To like encourage that, I think you have a tendency to wanna help as many people as you can, do as much as you can, and I think it ends up putting you in a tough spot where, you've got no time, and it's you kinda get to the end of the day, and there's things that maybe could have had more space, so I can, when I'm back from my trip, I will try to encourage you in that as I see it. For myself, I do need to unplug, but more than just having that, like, unplug, I think I'm really starting to and maybe maybe you can help me with this as I go off for a week, but there may be a few questions for me around why I let my identity get wrapped around being all things and kind of being present and being on it and being available and getting it done, like, there's a lot of value in that for me that, um, I wonder what it would be like if it wasn't, and I see people in my life that I'm like, they're so chill right now, like, they're totally present, and, uh, and they're not trying to be all things, and I I wanna figure out what that is. So maybe there's some good time staring out into the ocean this week, I can think about that, but, and I also just need to get my time back for running and getting some time for exercise, like, that's just the simple one, but
Yeah,
yeah, a couple
yeah,
things there.
yeah. Yeah, so good. I was not expecting us to, have our own session today in session, but I'm glad we did. So, I hope hearing our stories, hearing this, like, model, this just simple stat that when you show up into a room as a leader, 77% of it is already done. It's who you are when you show up. You can do all these other things. Great companies need all of these other things. Most of them you could delegate if you're not good at, but you can't delegate being inwardly sound and you can't delegate being others focused. So if that's going to be 77% of what makes you exceptional, whether you're leading yourself or leading a team or leading an organization, I really encourage you to dig in. Like this is where the work needs done. So, all right, thanks for joining us. Hey, this is a show. We're trying to grow it. If you enjoyed it, the best thing you can do is share it with somebody and subscribe. If you want some more daily tips, reminders, thoughts, we have a daily email. It is the shortest email you will receive all day. It's called the261.com. There's 261 business days in a work year. So that's a really, really helpful. I read it every day. I'm like reminded, and McKenzie and I wrote it together.
Yeah, they're like, "Oh, yeah, we needed that." We wrote it a year ago, we're like, "I forgot I wrote that." That's really
Yeah.
helpful.
Yeah, that's pretty good. All right.
One thing one thing we should also let them know about, we do have an assessment that they can take that helps them, like, what will help you self-evaluate on the, attributes of an exceptional leader. It'll give you a really, really cool breakdown to understand all of this. It explains it in depth, and it gives you a little personal growth plan that we developed with our friends at Exceptional Leaders. So for me, like holistically healthy, secure, and settled, I can go and there's a couple of books, videos, articles that might help me, work through it. But um,
And if you're really bold and vulnerable, you can do the 360 version and get some people around you to give you feedback.
right. So that's leaderpulse.io. We can share that as well. But it's a great assessment and it's totally aligned with this, will help you really evaluate where you're at.
Yep. All right. We'll see you next week for another session.